Mark Harmon was never the type to chase headlines. For decades, he let his work do the talking, the quiet intensity of Leroy Jethro Gibbs, the steely resolve on screen, the measured words off it. But behind that silence was a story he never told, a story that haunted him. Now, after years of keeping it buried, Mark has finally opened up. And what he's revealed about his sister's turbulent marriage to rock and roll legend Ricky Nelson has stunned fans, friends, and even those closest to him. It wasn't just a celebrity love story gone wrong, it was a slow unraveling of two lives trying to hold on to something real in a world built on illusion. Fame, addiction, heartbreak, and a family bond tested to its breaking point. Mark didn't speak to stir drama. He spoke because the truth needed a voice. And what he shared? It's not what anyone expected. Long before Mark Harmon became a household name, his life was already being shaped by fame not his own, but his family's. He was born into a legacy most people only read about. His father, Tom Harmon, wasn't just a football star, he was a legend. A Heisman Trophy winner in 1940, war hero, and later a national sports broadcaster. He represented the American ideal: tough, disciplined, untouchable. Mark grew up in the shadow of that greatness, knowing from a young age what pressure really meant. Then there was his mother, Elise Knox, a Hollywood beauty of the 1940s, film actress, fashion icon, and one of the era's most recognizable faces. Glamour came naturally to her, but so did elegance and restraint. Together, Tom and Elisa were a power couple in their time, famous, respected, and deeply protective of their family. For Mark, that blend of athletic excellence and artistic flair wasn't just background noise, it was the foundation of who he would become. It taught him discipline, yes, but also balance. How to stand still in a room full of noise. How to keep calm when the world's watching. And when he stepped into the spotlight years later, he didn't run toward it like so many others. He walked in quietly on his own terms. But behind the calm exterior, cracks were already forming in the family's golden image, and the first would appear through his sister Kristen. And what happened next would change everything. Mark Harmon could have coasted on his last name. He didn't. While the children of celebrities often chased the spotlight from the start, Mark ran a different route straight onto the football field. At UCLA, he wasn't just another athlete with a famous dad. He earned the role of starting quarterback, commanding the field with quiet confidence and a relentless work ethic. Teammates called him calm under pressure. Coaches called him a natural leader. Fame wasn't the goal, excellence was. Even then, Hollywood wasn't part of the plan. He considered law school, advertising, normal careers, grounded paths, but something kept pulling him towards storytelling. Not the flashy kind, the kind that reveals something deeper. By the late 1970s, he began landing small roles on television: Emergency, Policewoman, The Love Boat. He wasn't chasing stardom. He was studying, learning, getting better. Then came Saint Elsewhere, the breakout. As Dr. Bobby Caldwell, he delivered charm with depth. A fan favorite. A critic's pick. And when People magazine named him Sexiest Man Alive in 1986, it didn't change him. If anything, it made him more private, less interested in celebrity, more focused on craft. Mark Harmon wasn't trying to be a star. He was trying to build something real. But while his own career was quietly rising, his sister's world was quietly falling apart, and the man at the center of it was one of the most beloved names in music history. And the cracks in that picture-perfect marriage were about to become impossible to hide. Kristen Harmon was born into the same glittering legacy as her younger brother, but her story took a much darker turn. In the early 1960s, Kristen married Ricky Nelson, America's golden boy. A teen idol with chart-topping hits, movie deals, and a built-in fanbase from the adventures of Ozzie and Harriet. To the public, their relationship was the stuff of tabloid dreams. Two beautiful young stars from two iconic families, brought together by fame and fate. But what fans saw in the headlines was only a fraction of the truth. Behind closed doors, Kristen was struggling not just with the pressures of fame, but with her own identity. She was more than Ricky Nelson's wife, but the spotlight rarely allowed her to be anything else. She had talent, she had dreams, But slowly, those dreams started to get buried beneath Ricky's career and the mounting chaos that surrounded it. For Mark, it was painful to watch. He idolized his sister. She was bold, artistic, emotional, a magnetic force in their family. But as the years went on, that spark began to dim. Something was pulling Kristen down, and no one in the family knew how to stop it. Ricky's career was evolving, and with it came the darker side of the industry. Long tours, financial troubles, whispers of substance abuse. Kristen, too, began battling demons of her own. Depression, dependence, disconnection. They were two people trying to hold on to each other in a world that wouldn't slow down for either of them. And through it all, Mark stayed silent, watching, hurting, and feeling more powerless than ever. But what he saw during those years would stay with him forever, and nearly broke him. Mark Harmon never spoke out, not to the press, not even to close friends, but he saw everything. Late-night phone calls from Kristen, her voice cracking between sentences, tearful visits, moments where the confident, creative sister he grew up with seemed like a stranger, lost, fragile, fading. And Mark? He didn't have answers. He barely had words. He watched his sister cling to a marriage that looked perfect from the outside but was unraveling from within. Ricky, once the poster boy of clean-cut American rock, was struggling to adapt to a changing industry. His music was no longer dominating charts. Money problems piled up. The spotlight dimmed, and in that dim light, darker habits took root. Kristen tried to hold the family together for the kids, for Ricky, for herself. But the toll was brutal. Addiction crept in like a quiet storm. Arguments turned louder. Distance grew. And the love that once seemed bulletproof was now barely holding on. Mark remembers moments that still haunt him. Watching Kristen walk into family gatherings with a forced smile. Seeing her pretend things were okay when they weren't. Wanting desperately to help, but knowing that love alone can't fix someone else's pain. You want to protect your sister, he later said. You want to fix things. But sometimes, all you can do is be there. And listen. And he did, even when it broke him. But the worst was still to come, and when it did, it left scars that never fully healed. By the early 1980s, the cracks had widened into chasms. Kristen and Ricky were no longer just struggling, they were breaking. The love that once held them together had become a war zone of resentment, relapse, and regret. They tried to fix it. Therapy. Time apart. Family interventions. But nothing stuck. Whatever they'd built was sinking, and they were both going under with it. Financial pressure made everything worse. Ricky's once thriving career had stalled. His fame hadn't vanished, but the money had fast. And Kristen, caught in a cycle of emotional exhaustion and dependence, could no longer carry the weight of it all. Their children were growing up in the chaos. Mark saw it. Everyone did. But no one could stop it. In 1982, the marriage finally ended in divorce. It wasn't explosive. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that comes after years of shouting behind closed doors. A quiet that felt like failure. Mark later said, "By the time they split, a lot had already been lost, but I never doubted how much they loved their kids." The fallout was brutal. Kristen was left to pick up the pieces, struggling with guilt, grief, and the pressure of single motherhood. Ricky tried to move forward, but demons don't disappear, they just get harder to hide. His health declined. His music faltered. His inner battles became harder to fight. And then, just 3 years after the divorce, the unimaginable happened. Ricky Nelson's life ended suddenly, and nothing would ever be the same. Ricky Nelson's death in 1985 wasn't just a tragedy, it was a shock that echoed through Hollywood and shattered those closest to him. To the world, he was the fallen idol, a rock and roll icon lost too soon in a mysterious plane crash. But to Mark Harmon, he was family. A flawed, complex man who'd once been part of their Sunday dinners. Someone he'd admired, worried about, argued with, and ultimately mourned. Ricky wasn't just my brother-in-law, Mark would later say. He was part of our family. His death left a hole in all our hearts, especially Kristen's. Kristen never recovered from the loss. Whatever strength she had left was fractured the day Ricky died. The pain and the guilt swallowed her. She carried it for decades. And Mark? He carried something too, the weight of not being able to save her. He watched as Kristen's spirit dimmed year by year. Addiction re-entered her life like an old familiar enemy. The light she once had, that fierce, artistic fire, became harder to find. Her art became more emotional, more raw. She kept painting. But what she was really doing was surviving. Behind the scenes, Mark tried to stay close. Tried to be the steady hand she could hold on to. But even he knew some storms don't pass. Some just get quieter as they pull everything down with them. In 2018, Kristen passed away from a heart attack. The official cause was simple. The real cause wasn't. Her heart, Mark said quietly, was too big for the world sometimes. She loved Ricky. She loved her kids. She just couldn't outrun the shadows that followed her. It was the final chapter in a story filled with beauty and heartbreak, and one that Mark still carries with him, even now. But what made him finally speak after all these years? The answer wasn't fame or attention, it was something far more human. For decades, Mark Harmon said nothing. Not when the tabloids twisted the story, not when rumors painted Ricky and Kristen's marriage as nothing more than a messy Hollywood cautionary tale. Not when fans speculated, sometimes cruelly, about what really happened behind closed doors. He stayed silent out of loyalty, out of grief, out of love. But as the years passed, and both Ricky and Kristen were gone, something shifted. Mark began to feel the weight of that silence, not just for himself, but for them, the people, the truth, the parts of the story no one had ever told. This wasn't about scandal, or headlines, or clearing names. It was about giving two people, flawed, brilliant, broken, and deeply human, the dignity of being understood. They weren't perfect, Mark admitted, but they loved, they tried, and that matters. So he finally spoke. Carefully, quietly, not to rewrite history, but to reclaim it. To remind the world that behind every glamorous photo is a real person. Behind every broken marriage is 1,000 moments no one sees. Behind every tragedy is a family still trying to make sense of it all. By breaking his silence, Mark wasn't just telling their story, he was preserving it. He was making sure Ricky and Kristen weren't remembered only for how things ended, but for who they were at their core. And in doing that, he gave their story and their pain a kind of peace. Mark Harmon didn't speak to make headlines. He spoke because some truths deserve more than silence. The story of Ricky Nelson and Kristen Harmon wasn't just a Hollywood romance gone wrong. It was a story of love pushed to its limit, of fame becoming a cage, and of two people trying and failing to hold on to each other in a world that never gave them room to breathe. Mark watched it all, the rise, the fall, the silence that followed. And when he finally found the words, they weren't bitter. They weren't dramatic. They were honest. He spoke to remind us that fame doesn't make you invincible. That behind the cameras and red carpets are real people with real pain, real heartbreak, and sometimes no way out. He didn't need to share this story, but he did. And in doing so, he honored his sister. He honored Ricky. He showed us that the strongest thing you can do is tell the truth, even when it hurts. Because sometimes, the most powerful legacy isn't in what we achieve, it's in what we reveal.